So assignment 1 is not to create a learning resource, but it's to create a LOTE e-portfolio utilizing accessible whatever. So you can do it right. Pardon me, say it again. Well, I will change it today. As soon as we finish, as soon as we finish the discussion, I will go and update the assignment, because this is, I mean, I was wondering about it myself, but I looked at it and I thought, oh, okay, well, whatever, like, but now I realize that that's actually just the title got mixed up. That's all. Whereas the task description is okay. So the task description is okay. Someone else joined us online, so hopefully they can actually see my screen. So in regard to our LOTE profile, so what do we need to have? Well, yeah, but we've done it. We've done it. So Simon, just be patient a little bit. So people from last semester who worked with me for earlier years for teaching, right? This is just for the older students, but the other one was for younger students. So basically, the other one was, I think, for 7 to 10, right? And this is for 11 and 12, right? Years. Okay. So now I have to sort of find a middle way here. I work with this assignment in many different ways, depending on the student cohort I get. All right. So what I would like to do, because Simone hasn't done with us semester 1, she's done it with someone else. So I might just try to actually navigate between Mika and Simone to actually get the focus of the assignment. Actually, is as follows. Okay. I might just put it down. In module 1, don't get too scared a little bit, okay? Just don't get too scared. This is okay. So without any fear, Mika has done assignment 1 of this kind with me before, but it was kind of like a little bit introductory. And what I would like you to do now, Mika, and also this is okay, Simon can actually jump into it with no trouble at all. In module 1, right here, you will find a reference to a paper. Do you see that? You've read it already. That's wonderful. What I will excellent. So that's why you didn't have to have any fear. So what I would like you to do actually is to take the curriculum. What I would like to do is for you to actually read it, then discuss it with me, and then see for yourselves a little bit how you could actually create an e-portfolio about your own skills by actually addressing all of that. I know. It's not going to be difficult, but it's not going to be easy. Okay? Because it is one thing, and actually Mika has actually found that last semester, it's one thing to talk about your experiences as a LOTE student or a LOTE user from just experience and intuition. And another one is to start learning how to work with the curriculum and with some sort of evidence from the readings. So now, I'll let you in on the secret here. The secret is that even though the paper that you're reading here, oh, this is just the end of the paper, which is the framework, right? So just we'll take it slowly, don't worry, and we might do it, week. I mean, section by section every week. It's not a problem. We've got 8 weeks to do it, or 9. I know 8 weeks to do it. We have, so that's okay. But what Yes, okay, let's read. So what does it mean to exactly? So what I would like you to do actually is to stretch yourselves a little bit, because if you just wrote, what does it mean to speak another language? Then you could go to, how are you going to know? And you say, well, it means this, it means it's just from intuition or maybe from something maybe you read somewhere else. But what I really want you to look at this question is from the perspective of the capabilities, from the perspective of the notions. So basically what this article here does, it makes you think of the concept of learning from different perspectives. Do you see it? We don't have to read it today. We don't have to read it today. But basically what it makes you to think is about internalize. So I'm just taking it slowly. Okay. So basically there's not just one concept of learning. There are different dimensions of the concept. It's just music. You can't talk about I can't imagine one talking about music in one way only. Music, you can talk about music as poetry, as waves. You can talk about music as energy. You can talk about music as sounds. You can talk about music as history. You can talk about music from many different perspectives. So what I'm saying is that the curriculum gives us some sort of, you know, perspectives from which we can actually think about learning, activities, and technology. I mean, I talk about technology because I don't want to cover the whole 12 weeks at this very second. But, you know, technology is part of the current teaching model or teaching context. So just let me take it first. So I'll just go back to the assignment in 1 second, but let me first tell you one thing about this paper that I wrote with Amy Cash. I use the term children, and I use here the term literacy throughout the paper. But I will let you in on a secret, which goes like this. I am a LOTE teacher. I just dub as literacy teacher as well. Okay, I just happen to have actually been now for the last so many years in the context of teaching pre-service teachers how to teach literacy, but my basic education was in LOTE as a LOTE teacher. So basically, rather than fear that this paper is written from the perspective of literacy and therefore might not apply to language learning, in fact, in the paper was written the other way around. I actually applied everything I learned as a LOTE teacher and applied it to literacy. Okay, so in a sense, you are kind of in a more advantageous position. And so that's why I'm saying, do not worry, it talks about literacy, because now you can even yourselves make links between literacy in English and also literacy in LOTE, so to speak. Because I made that jump, and you can see it is possible. But fundamentally, this paper is written from the perspective of LOTE. And when I talk about, for example, when you reread it, in fact, if you don't read much more for this semester, it'll be almost all you have to read, plus a few PowerPoints. I'll show you how to actually design think about making a unit of learning of work and to design it better, and that's gonna be good, just enough. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that when you actually read the paper, and you will see references there to Andrew Lyon's framework, and he talks about feedback, and I oppose Andrew Lyon. We pronounce our name as Lyon, not Leon. So, right, because his parents couldn't speak English, so they Lian was Lion, right? Clear. So we got stuck with that surname Lion, as opposed to reading it as every normal person reads it as Leon. It is very comical. Anyway, oh, you see, this is what I'm saying. That was the normal rating, but you couldn't argue with the parents of my husband, because they were lawyers from Egypt. They knew everything. So it's very sweet. But anyway, so we actually, for many reasons, we sort of love this story of Lion, so we stick with Lion. But anyway, you will see there the concept of feedback that he actually produces, and it's a very interesting feedback. And now I have to actually discuss all of that with you so that it becomes increasingly clear. But he works only in language teaching, Andrew Lyon. He never worked in literacy. In fact, here I've got his PowerPoint because I'm developing something for tomorrow. And I've got, or had, I don't know, I must have removed it. I had his paper here somewhere in my PowerPoint just open. I mean, something must have gotten deleted. But yeah, so when you actually read, when he talks about feedback, it's all about second language learning. I just dub it as literacy because feedback is feedback. Feedback, whether you provide it, the principles are the same, right? Because the brain is the same. So Mika, the challenge for you will be now to go deeper into your portfolio and actually now, right? We did that kind of work in any event last semester, but I would like you to go deeper into your presentation of your own experience as a LOTE student and a LOTE speaker, and actually now reflect on what is in this paper and how it relates to you. I would like you to reflect on the evidence that is produced in this paper. So for example, this paper actually targets quite important people and in fact opposes itself against these people by clearly demarcating that the world, creating a watershed between the world of the past, which is the world of these old professors, be it Mary Kalantzis or G or whoever, and even Hattie. And now there's information coming from neuroscience, and we better integrate it and think about ourselves in view of that evidence. So I'm just gonna go to the. Are you guys there? Okay, so if we were to think, for example, like what LOTE practices do you currently engage with regularly and how? And in order to, right, so hold that thought, right? And in order to prevent you from saying, well, I speak to my parents and I speak to my students, I don't want to hear it, right? Because I can write it. You don't need this unit to produce an answer like that. So what practices of LOTE do you engage in? So from the perspective of the personal and social capabilities, so basically how your interactions in LOTE actually impact on your perception of the world, social capabilities, and of yourself. Here's the question, right? How your interactions in LOTE that you will discuss, you can give examples, but we would like it to be a little bit embellished. And I would like to hear how those interactions actually impact on your view of the world and of yourself in it. Give us examples. Okay, so also what kinds of opportunities you engage with in order to generate that dialogue, that internal dialogue that challenges your understandings of yourself and of others. So are you just basically talking to your mother, or do you actually engage in activities that challenge your social and personal capabilities, which challenge your understanding of what you think of others and of yourself with them? And in terms of technology, please read it a little bit, but basically what it says here, but this is about how we will be using this table to actually support ourselves for assignment 1, 2. But here, let's read it a little bit. Imaginative use of technology can allow students to reduce the processing load they experience when confronted with a task at hand, right? So we will be learning how technology can actually support our students in finding answers to their own questions. So in terms of the personal and social capabilities, what do you do? How do you use technology to help yourself to find out answers to your own questions about your interlocutors and yourself in relation to them? Do you see what I'm saying? So here you can produce a whole page totally of the text just on by addressing those concepts in this paper, or just those in this table. Can you come up with examples so you can actually test me whether I'm actually working with you well? Can you come up with some examples? Like, for example, in terms of personal and social capabilities, which is how do you construct yourself in LOTE, right? So social is how do you construct yourself with LOTE? You'll find answers to all of these in one sentence, basically, to each of those capabilities. So in the paper, they're there. So here is how you construct yourself and others. I would like to talk about critical and creative first. So what range of resources do you utilize in order to actually make these constructions, right? Because you can do it in terms of quite a narrow choice or quite a broad choice. And so basically, what picture of society, what picture of a society, I've never known. What picture of a society do your resources legitimize? You might straight away see what I'm after here. So if you use particular range of resources, right? So what do they legitimize? What picture of society do you actually, when you use your resource, even when you are teaching Italian or Japanese, what kind of resources do you use to challenge yourself? I mean, what kind of resources do you draw on your knowledge? And, and therefore, what picture of society do they legitimize? Are you using, is your learning of LOTE or use of LOTE only about that language, or are we learning languages and using languages in order to have international perspective, right? International and intercultural perspective. Yeah, I get it. I get it. I've been there. Yeah. Right. So this is what yes, I'm absolutely like 99% on target. I'm leaving 1% for myself just to clarify. Right. This is what I mean. I don't know what language you're teaching and you will be teaching, but the idea is that if we teach English, it's not to generate the spirit of the old empire in our students. And the same comes to when we teach Chinese. It is not to revive the empire uh, emotions in our students. You know, now when you learn Chinese, you are part of that old myth. It is we're learning a language in order to internationalize our perspectives. And that's why curriculum, I have to say to you, I'm the only one in Australia who loves the Australian curriculum. And that's why whether whether we teach Chinese or Vietnamese, the idea of internationalization, and they put Asia, they put indigenous, and they basically also put community building, right? I love it. And all of this is in this paper. Because what I'm saying is the range of resources you use will actually illustrate to your students the purpose of learning Vietnamese or the purpose of learning Chinese. This is about creating connections. It is not about making them Chinese. And it's more powerful because in that way, when students actually learn, say, Chinese, they see a good reason. They see a good reason because now they see that there is that it's not just all about the characters and meanings of words. And I'll get you out of that meaning of words pretty soon. Today or next time we meet. But basically, it's not about the things that everybody else thinks is Chinese. The Chinese is about actually creating international perspective in children's heads. So yes, all of these symbols and the way people work with symbols are very important. But what they're important for is how they actually enable our students here in Australia to create connection between indigenous Chinese communities and our own lives, as opposed to or even Vietnamese lives even as well. So you can actually now and then have a guest speaker of another language that you don't teach to create those connections as opposed to just reinforcing stereotypes. And actually, I mean, I know that you and I are all both thinking, because so I'm just gonna steal this moment as you are thinking. I just went after I finished teaching semester 1 with Mika. I went in November to Vietnam, where I was teaching for 4 days in Hanoi and for 4 days in Da Nang. I was teaching teachers of English, from teachers who teach children from 0, well, from 3 or 4 or 5, till throughout university. I had the lot. I know. And because it was such a prestigious the whole thing was very prestigious, and was a lot of pressure, and I had to rethink. I mean, as an intellectual, every day you rethink your models. It's not like you know it and it's finished, right? It's not, and that's the problem. But anyway, they put so much pressure on me, those 4 workshops here in Da Nang and 4 workshops in Hanoi, University of Hanoi, University of Da Nang, that I had to actually polish a lot of my thoughts. And that's one of the things that actually came out from my math. And that's what I was not teaching last semester. In fact, I'm sure that Mika might have heard a little bit of it, but it wasn't as clear as now. But actually learning LOTE is actually about internationalization. It's not about the LOTE itself, because a second language doesn't exist, right? We in English use English in order to internationalize ourselves, right? We don't want to have a narrow view of the world, even though we speak English. So it doesn't matter. It's exactly about drawing those connections between symbols and cultures, and enabling to see parallels, enabling to explore also different ways of doing things and what those ways enable. Right? I was just having lunch with 2 PhD students of mine. They're both from Indonesia. And it's just very funny because just before I had lunch, one of their colleagues asked me to be on Facebook with them, and I checked the profile of a person, and it said it showed a picture which basically said hijab will protect you from everything, and it had 2, I don't know, something like lollipops standing there on the picture, and one was without the hijab and was attacked by insects. And I thought to myself, think about it. When the hijab was invented, I don't know when it was invented, but it might be going longer than we think, right? It might have not have been the prophet that invented hijab, might have been even earlier. And imagine those people, how did we all live back then? You know, water and soap are just recent events. People lived on the desert, didn't have any access to water, didn't have, it's a tool of hygiene. If you cover your head, obviously there will be less transmission of insects. It'll be less transmission of the scent blowing into your ears and all of those things. So it's very interesting how just before I had lunch, I just had this picture and it made me think that, just like lots of clothes that we wear have their historical basis, the same with the hijab. So when we actually learn, whether we teach Arabic and whether we reflect on our own context of the use of Arabic or Chinese, it is about creating this cross-cultural connection so that our students, when they learn Chinese, for example, as you're mentioning, Simone, what the idea is that they actually become modern Chinese speakers, the people who can use Chinese to connect concepts, not someone who can recite, something in Chinese and talk about, really nothing. It's better to be able to make connections with bad Chinese than make no connections and recite 200 words. So that was the old way of thinking, which was very Victorian thinking, right? Very industrial age thinking, which was our students have to speak perfect German, perfect Chinese, perfect Japanese, right? No mistakes. So we will teach them. I'm not taking you through those methods because I don't want to reinforce them, nor do I want to waste time. But I will probably from experience, you already have been probably exposed to these things and might have been taught this way. So there were different methods in the past of how to teach languages, and basically they were all motivated by one single obsession, which was how to make people speak perfect sentences. Right? So, well, the illness is everywhere. Perfection. There's an obsession of perfection, and yet, when you look inside of your heart, when did you learn the most? When you made a mistake. Nobody who's a perfect. For example, so when a gymnast who we admire, during the Olympic shows, has made a million of mistakes on the gym floor. That's why you have a coach. So you learn, you analyze, you think about it, you feel it. And nowadays, coaching in any sport has reached its ultimate. We have meditation, we have music therapy, we have, spas and all of that. It's not just all about making a movement perfect. It's about the whole body experience in the world and whole brain experience. So what I'm saying is basically let's absolutely adore errors and work with errors. We have a cult of errors nowadays, in this unit at least. We have a cult of errors. Allow children to fail and explore how else they can look at things, right? So we allow them to actually explore, make guesses, and hypothesize how else they could do and explore again. So we're not obsessed about accuracy and learning 200 words. What we would like our students, in fact, is to have actually intelligent brains and intercultural and international brains when they actually interact with Chinese people, so that they can recognize when a person in China, what are they drawing on when they talk to them? What are they drawing on? Oh yeah, we are the greatest. We are something something, right? So you recognize when the symbols actually that people use betray international spirit and when they betray something else. You want our students to be actually aware of it. In English, you can detect it very quickly. Very quickly. So when you talk to people, like when you actually have to assess your audience, which is the social capabilities, right? When we speak to a person, very quickly we can locate them historically, where they actually sit or socially, what their views are. I mean, we can detect Donald Trump in no time. Right? So it's about making intercultural connections so that they can see connections. That's true. But it's also about learning how Chinese people themselves engage in the project of internationalization. How they actually use international connections. Or do they? I'm sure that some of them do, some of them do, some of them don't. It happens everywhere. But what does it look? What does a Chinese person look like when they actually do engage with international references, symbolic references? What does it look like? So you might want to look at advertisements. You might want to look at the way they structure their environment and so on, is to actually see what kind of overtones are in their environment to reflect the international connection. And how do we do it in Australia? And how can we connect with the Chinese symbols in order to illustrate international connections, and not international in terms of, national boundaries, but cultures and languages? It's a question time now. Okay, guys, any questions? You have to ask questions now. It's a question time now. Any questions? You can. You see, you have things here referring to cultural, social, personal, all of that. So they all come from the curriculum. And the idea here is to use this paper, this article, and use the framework to actually think of ourselves in relation to the curriculum. But now we have, I mean, you might want to read the paper and actually reflect on the evidence that it actually contains. Sorry for doing this to you, but okay, so we have here, I just have to break this. Right, so it talks about, so it defines personal and social capabilities, and it talks about how other people talk about them. So they want to do games. So here's, you see, I used to think games are all right, and people who are close to me say games are all right, and games are all right. But when you actually read these people here in neuroscience, they will basically say that in fact nothing is as simple as just students being able to dissociate fiction from reality. And it actually, when you think about it, it makes sense. So think about it in terms of abstract terms, So say that students can differentiate between the fiction of the game and the reality. Say that they can. But if we do not give them tools, right? So we ourselves have to think, what tools do we use? What tools do we use as LOTE users? But if we do not give them tools that tell them how to work with reality, then the only thing they have is those fiction games. And if fiction games fail to teach them critical and ethical thinking, then basically we're setting up our students for failure, for cultural failures, for social failures. Because games quite frequently don't have that critical component built into them. And that's why I really liked when the neuroscientists are now, and this is, I mean, when I quote Damasio and Imordino Young, I'm not quoting here people from some sort of backwaters of neuroscience, right? So what they say is, We feel, therefore we learn. Learning is actually sitting in our limbic system. It's actually emotional. It's not cognitive, right? So it is very interesting, because if you will talk in the portfolio about yourself as a user of LOTE, right? Do 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 say how you actually, what kind of, what do I have here? What kind of activities and what kind of tools you use in order to challenge your prejudices, your expectations, your understandings of the people you're with. Your, and even though it might seem like maybe we don't do that as LOTE users, but I have to say to you, I've been living in Australia for 30 years and I continuously do that. Especially since the target population who speaks in English, who uses English, is not just people who are Anglo. And that's very interesting. Who speaks Chinese today? Are Chinese people actually exporters of higher education? Do people go there to study? Who is speaking Chinese other than Taiwanese and the Chinese? Is there an international population of people that actually speak Chinese? Do Indonesians speak Chinese? It's very interesting. Is speaking, is learning Chinese this similar to learning English? Is it empowering you beyond the country of China? And if it is, imagine how many challenges we as users of Chinese actually are encountering. It is no longer languages, especially because of the ASEAN community now being formed. And although there are many critics who say there will not be enough money and all of that, documents have been drawn, policies have been made. ASEAN community is an identity and people are working towards shared goals. So within that ASEAN community, there will be travel. My own husband teaches in Thailand Chinese students. So the Chinese students, well, they do it in English. But, not every degree in Thailand is done in English. So even Thai language is getting actually international profile. So basically learning another language is no longer just about that population. We have really gone global. So the idea is, how do you integrate that globality in your own learning experiences? Is that so in terms, I'm still talking in terms of personal and social capabilities. Has that idea of internationalization in the global world integrated in your own experiences of how you look at, how you work, how you construct your audience? Who do you know speaks Japanese? Who do you know speaks Chinese? Do you think about it? Do you challenge yourself in that? What activities have you actually created on Facebook? Have you found people who spoke Chinese on particular pages and they weren't neither English nor Chinese? Surely there must be someone who speaks Chinese and ain't English or Chinese, right? Have you detected them? Have you interacted with them? So did you use technology imaginatively to broaden your understandings of the world of Chinese? It's very interesting. So we created this framework with Amy to basically poke at teachers from different angles to make them kind of flesh out their own thinking of what it means to use a particular kind of literacy, right? So for us in this unit, it will be the LOTE literacy. So pictures and all of that is great because symbols do matter. Um, Symbols do matter. Do you interact with a literacy teacher in your school, for example? I mean, you might be not teaching, but there are some things that we need to think about because there are cross-curriculum priorities and capabilities, and what's required is that there is an impact from different units or from different subjects on other subjects. So, for example, when you have a classroom, I am not into decoration, but teachers are. So when you go to a to a transition classroom, what we call transition in Darwin, which is 5-year-olds, or any classroom. How is the indigenous person feeling? How is the Vietnamese person feeling? Are there any symbols from their country? Do we have classrooms looking international, or do they look plain and regular? Right? So what impact can we actually, internationalize even our school? So that our students who are learning in Australia do not feel that they are inheriting an empire, right? That they actually develop an understanding of their world, that social capability, that their world is international. Their world is not just in English for their phantom English who doesn't exist. Any person who makes good money in Australia and has a good position has a global head. Okay, do you have any questions? Mika, Mika, in relation to what you've done in semester one, is this kind of pushing you more? Yeah. Mm. Well, it's very simple. It's not that you teach. Okay, so really, the question really is internationalization visible through Japanese practices? If you do not teach Japanese by using textbook, but by using internet resources, is internationalization visible through those resources? What do people speak about? What symbols do they use? What are they aware of? Are Japanese people only talking about sashimi, or are they actually have right? I couldn't think of narrowing it down enough. So basically, are they talking about sashimi, or do they have actually international connections? And also, how can how is the Japanese um, life today, not just Japanese in terms of Japanese words or whatever, but Japanese stories, Japanese myths, but also Japanese current life? How is this impacting on our own students' sense of the global world? And in order to actually answer all these questions, right, you need to think about the resources that you're using. That's why I am saying that teaching from a textbook is not just bad, it's so old and so useless, because you cannot bring in the world in Australia through a textbook. Just you can't. We had been against textbooks since the 70s. I'm so old, right? So we've been against textbooks since the 70s. I personally was already in it only in the 80s. I'm younger, but my husband was since the 60s and 70s, since whenever he got a job to teach French at the University of Queensland, right? So there's been a movement since the 70s against the textbook, if not earlier. But so it's been for quite a while, but it's really hard to beat out from LOTE teachers the dependency on the textbook, because teachers do not really think about all these capabilities and cross-curriculum priorities deeply enough. Everybody bypasses it. But this framework with its questions actually gives us what I said is prods, makes us think a little bit more, really. So not only there is an internationalization component in the culture of, in the practices of current Japan, but also we can think how we can actually bring Japan to here, to internationalize our own perspectives on the world. How can we put Japan on the map of students' brains? Right? How can we actually make our students believe that their interlocutors are not just Anglo, not even just indigenous, but actually that there is a world out there, that without considering that world, they really have a village life. Now, what I suggest is if you would like to, I might prepare a little bit more for next meeting with my own agenda, but you might actually prepare a little your portfolio and just maybe, just create a portfolio. If you guys don't know how to do it, you just go on YouTube and you say how to create a blog tutorial, okay, how to create an online website tutorial, and there's going to be hundreds tutorials. But create a site and start actually writing. And if you want pictures or so, start creating ideas which will be responses to this, right? So even say you can start with explaining capability and its objective, then say in terms of learning I do this, in terms of activities that allow me to this I do this, and in terms of technology that I use to enable me to do this better so that I can achieve this. This is what I do. So just focus, maybe just start writing, and you will see probably that as you explain the social capability, you will probably have to integrate critical and ethical as well, right? But just start writing and we can actually assess it, how it went, how you going with that. And I will be teaching you some other things which I want to cover, but please also read the paper itself quite in detail if you don't mind. And you don't have to, I mean, you've got a few weeks to do that, but I would like you to read it, because there are very important statements there about feedback. Now, you will not find them anywhere else. This is what makes this paper so unique, because we've written it, but it's also sitting on the newest discoveries. So it's very, very important for us to start thinking about how we ourselves construct feedback for ourselves, and then later on how we will translate that feedback into a well-designed unit of work. And I know that Mika has created a unit of work with me for assignment 1. We'll just move it now for older children, but for older students, but also we will actually rev it up a little bit, make it a bit more now sophisticated. So yeah, I don't want to go any further, but that's basically if you see this, I'll be teaching you about a paradigm. This is what the talk I'm doing for tomorrow. But this is a study from neuroscience that I just found recently. And it talks about fruit flies. It's very interesting. You don't have to watch it. But what it says is that if a fruit fly loses a fight with another fruit fly, right? They fight. What will happen in the how would this loss in the previous game, how will this impact on the subsequent fight? And what they found, that if the loser knew that they are fighting the winner, they would lose. So if I knew that Mika won against Simone, right? So if I were to fight Mika, Mika would win. But even if a loser was fighting someone that they didn't know that they one before, the loser still loses. Is a bit more active, does the lunges against the winner, right? But still loses. So the reason why I will be talking with you about the achievement-based model of teaching, which focuses on an achievement, because you can see how teaching which actually doesn't problematize the concept of achievement or the feeling of achievement actually, willingly or not, is setting up our students for failure, right? Because even if a fruit fly shows the fruit fly, once the fruit fly loses, they are more likely to lose the next fight. They just give up. And when look at just wait, look at number 4. When you put the loser against the loser, there was no fighting. It's very interesting. I mean, the literature in literacy and also in neuroscience says that children by the age of 7 have a pretty good understanding of their own efficacies, right? So they know whether they are winners or losers. They're all in the middle. They know that. And what I'm saying is, when we work with 16-year-olds, it really doesn't matter what they know. What really matters is what we know. And what we know is you can do it. So we will be learning about that model that actually relies on achievement as opposed to students. So every error is an achievement, right? So that's what I will be showing you, how to turn errors into success as opposed to errors into failure. So we will be looking at teaching practice, right? We will be looking at teaching practices completely differently than traditionally. In the era which is obsessed with perfection, what we will be teaching is actually error is where the success sits. Right? We learn from errors. We don't learn from successes. We need to confront our confusion. We need to be challenged and we need to confront our confusion. But we need to do it in a way that allows us to succeed. So how do we create environments that allow children to succeed? And that will be our question for basically for the whole semester. But for assignment 1, we just start slowly. Okay, are we brave enough to start assignment 1 and just a little bit to answer those questions and see how we can actually talk about our own experiences as a LOTE user in relation to capabilities, and maybe if you can cross-curriculum priorities, which are very simple. They basically talk about indigenous, Asian, and also about building sustainable communities. So so all of that is quite simple. So if you try for the next week, that would be great. And I will actually see how I can push the discussion more forward. Are you happy that you can start? You've got something to start to work with? Yeah, so even if you just do a little bit, so we can look at it and put it on the discussion board so we can find it, and just step by step, even if you do a little bit, we can move on. So I want that assignment to be done together. I want you to work with me through it. I don't want you to feel that you are left in week 8 to actually put together 8, right? I just want it to be out of the way. I want us to get it out of the way. All right? Okay, well, thank you very much for making it for the class, and I'll see you next week. Yeah, Tuesday, every Tuesday. Don't worry, whatever the learn line is showing, I don't know what it's showing, it will be every Tuesday from now on. Thank you so much too. Okay, bye. Bye.